Marcel was trapped. Trapped because he was forced to visit that disgusting part of the house. The stench, the insects crawling in every corner. Trapped because of his mother, who felt like she was making him carry the weight of her own mistakes, and instead of facing them herself, she dumped it all on him, as if to say, figure it out on your own. Trapped because the police had shown up out of nowhere and forced him to give them a full tour of the house, including that miserable section. Trapped because if they insisted on finishing that tour to the end, they would find the secret she never wanted them to know. Because if they knew that secret, she would have nothing left to say in her defense. Marcel was trapped, truly trapped. Marcel led the police to the end of that section, to a door sealed shut from the outside, bolted tight. The police turned to him. "What's behind this door?" Marcel hesitated, then answered, "It's my sister's room." He hoped that would be enough. He hoped they'd hear it, nod, and move on with the rest of the tour. But the police weren't satisfied. They told him to open it. Marcel refused. "You've already disturbed me and my mother enough by coming into this house. You don't need to disturb my sister too." But they pushed and pushed until Marcel gave in. His hands trembled as he undid the locks, one by one, clearing the path for the police to step inside. They walked into the room, and what they found left them frozen in horror. Inside the room, the police found mountains of filth and grime, rotting food scraps, waste that insects and rats had long claimed as their own. And in the middle of all that decay, a soiled straw bed, and on it a skeletal figure, something that looked like a skeleton, but it was alive. It moved. A woman, gaunt and emaciated, bearing the marks of decades of neglect. This was Blanche Monnier, Marcel's sister, the missing daughter of the Monnier family, missing for 25 years. The Monnier family had once been a wealthy aristocrats living in the city of Poitiers in western France, in a grand house befitting their status as one of the most prominent and respected families in Poitiers society. The family consisted of the father, Émile, who directed one of the city's art societies. The mother, Louise, was the lady of the house, well known in society for her charitable and social engagements. Their son was Marcel, a successful and respected lawyer, and their daughter was Blanche, beautiful, beloved, adored by everyone who knew her. The Monnier family was in every sense the model of a 19th century French aristocratic household. Émile died in 1876, leaving behind a fortune substantial enough for the family to preserve its social standing for generations to come. Blanche was 26 years old at the time. Known for her beauty, her warm and lively personality, she turned heads everywhere she went. Young men from wealthy, high-status families lined up to court her. But it seemed money and status were never what Blanche valued. She was a free spirit, rebellious by nature, determined to live life on her own terms. And more than anything, she wanted to experience love before marriage, not simply be married off for the sake of it. At some point, Blanche met a lawyer who lived in her area. He was older than her, not wealthy, and came from a modest, unremarkable family. But to Blanche, he was captivating, and to him, she was just as captivating. They connected. Over time, they fell in love, and began imagining a future together. They made a promise. They would marry and build the rest of their lives side by side. One day, Blanche worked up the courage to tell her mother about him. She explained that they were in love and that they were planning to marry. Blanche's mother was a deeply traditional, conservative woman. To her, marriage wasn't about love. It was a tool, a way to forge alliances with powerful families. And her daughter, young, beautiful, desired by everyone, Blanche had the chance to marry into the finest families in the region. So, when Blanche told her about this lawyer and her plans to marry him, her mother was horrified. A daughter of the Monnier family throwing herself away on some penniless nobody lawyer from a family nobody's even heard of? To her, it was obvious. Blanche was just a naive girl, still lost in the fantasy of the romance novels she used to read as a teenager. She had no idea what was actually good for her. Blanche's mother was certain she knew what was best for her daughter. She rejected the marriage completely. She told Blanche to leave him, to forget him, that within days someone 1,000 times better would come along. But Blanche was stubborn. To her, this was her decision, her life, her business, and her mother had no right to interfere this deeply. She held her ground and told her mother plainly she was going to marry the man she loved, no matter what her mother thought of him. Blanche kept seeing her lover, no matter what her mother said. It was clear now she was serious about this relationship, and she didn't care what anyone thought. But people had started noticing, and people had started talking. Word spread that the Monnier girl was involved in an illicit affair with a man from a nobody family. Rumors began to circulate that she was pregnant. Blanche's mother couldn't tolerate it any longer. She decided this had to end, one way or another. One evening, Blanche came home from seeing her lover. As always, her mother was waiting for her, ready for another fight about the marriage. As always, she told Blanche she was a naive girl who didn't know what was good for her, that she was dragging the family name through the mud. And as always, Blanche shot back that this was none of her business, that she was marrying him no matter what. But this time, Blanche had had enough of her mother's constant interference. She told her plainly if she didn't stop, Blanche would run away and never come back. That was the final straw. Blanche's mother decided talking to this girl was pointless. She called for her son, Marcel, and told him to help her restrain Blanche so they could discipline her properly. They grabbed her, dragged her through the house, forced her, struggling, into a small room in the attic, and locked the door. From the other side, her mother told her if she ever wanted to leave that room, she had to promise right then to end things with her lover. Blanche refused. She told them she would never abandon him, no matter what her mother did to her. The attic room was small, dark, cut off completely from any light outside, empty except for one old straw bed. Blanche's mother was certain this was only a matter of time, that Blanche would break and give in. She let her spend the night up there, convinced that by morning she'd have come to her senses. The next day, her mother climbed the stairs and asked through the door if Blanche had finally learned her lesson, but she was met with the same defiance. Blanche told her it was impossible. She would never leave him, no matter what her mother did to her. If Blanche wanted to keep resisting, her mother decided, then she would learn exactly what resistance would cost her. She told her, "Keep sitting in that dark room then. There's no way out of it until you learn to behave and listen to your mother." The second day came and went. The third day arrived, and still Blanche refused to break. Her mother began to realize that isolation alone wasn't working. It was time to try a different kind of pressure. Blanche might be able to endure sitting in the dark within four walls for a while, but surely she would never be able to endure hunger.
Blanche's mother stopped sending her meals altogether. Surely hunger would break her. Surely hunger would force her to give up her stubbornness and finally listen. But Blanche still refused to budge. She told them if her mother truly intended to starve her to death, then she could do whatever she wanted, because Blanche would rather die of hunger than give up the love of her life. Her mother began to feel like Blanche had lost her mind. No sane person, she thought, would choose death over simply ending a relationship. So she started sending small amounts of food to Blanche's room, barely enough for anyone to survive on. The fourth day came, then the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and Blanche was still locked in that room. Marcel tried to reason with her. He begged her to just listen to their mother, even if it meant lying, even if she didn't mean it. Just tell her she was ending the relationship so they'd let her out of the room. But Blanche refused. She held firm to her position. Marcel, too, began to believe his sister had gone mad. She could walk free right now simply by saying the words, and still she chose to stay in that dark room. Only someone insane, he thought, would do this. Days passed. Neither Blanche nor her mother gave an inch. People in the community began to notice Blanche's absence. They started asking questions. Where had she gone? What had happened to her? But her mother, Louise, and her brother, Marcel, had their answer ready. Blanche had lost her mind. They wept for her in front of others, telling people it was for the best that she remain at home rather than be sent to an asylum. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into years, and Blanche remained in that room. Eventually, people forgot about Blanche Monnier entirely. No one spoke of her anymore. Then, in 1901, an anonymous letter arrived at the desk of the public prosecutor of the Poitiers police. It read as follows:
Your Excellency, the Attorney General, I would like to inform you of a serious matter that requires your attention. I am speaking of a woman held captive in Madame Monnier's house in a pitiful state of starvation and filth for 25 years.
At first, the police were skeptical of the letter's credibility. Madame Monnier was a well-known, respected woman in high society, and the letter's source was anonymous. This could easily be nothing more than a prank. But a few officers recalled that Madame Monnier had once had a daughter, one who hadn't been seen or mentioned in years. The police decided to send a small team to the Monnier residence to investigate. They arrived at the house, now home only to the elderly Louise Monnier, in her 70s, living alone with her household staff. The police asked to speak with Madame Monnier directly. She refused to see them, telling them if they wanted anything, they could speak to her son, Marcel, who lived with his wife and daughter in the house across the way. The police went to Marcel's door. He was a man now in his 50s. They asked him to give them a tour inside Madame Monnier's house. At first, Marcel refused. He told her his mother was elderly and didn't need to be disturbed or unsettled by having her home searched. But something about his reaction struck the officers as suspicious. They pressed harder, telling Marcel it would be in their best interest to cooperate, or they would pursue legal action against them. Marcel gave in. He led them into Madame Monnier's house, and there
The tour ended with the discovery of Blanche, still locked away in that attic room after 25 years.
Blanche was in a horrifying state. She was now 50 years old, though it felt as though time had frozen the moment she was locked in that room at 25. For 25 straight years, she had not seen a single ray of sunlight. Her body was so emaciated, so wasted away, that the police feared she might die at any moment. She had been living in filth and decay for so long that the officers themselves could barely stand to remain in the room. They wanted out as fast as possible. The police called in emergency services, and finally, after all those years, Blanche was carried out of that room. The shock on her mother's face was unmistakable as she watched paramedics carry her daughter out of the house and rush her straight to the hospital. It was said that the years of isolation and darkness had taken Blanche's mind from her. She could barely speak. The look etched onto her face when they finally brought her out into the light and dressed her in clean clothes told a story words couldn't. The news exploded across France, and its shockwaves reached the entire world. Public outrage was immediate and overwhelming. The case became a national scandal. French authorities ordered the arrest of the mother, Louise, and her son, Marcel, pending trial. Crowds gathered outside the Monnier residence, shouting, demanding justice, demanding accountability, right as the arrests were made. According to witnesses, the shock on Louise's face was plain to see. Just yesterday, she had been one of the most respected women in society. Now, that same society was chanting against her, demanding she pay for what she'd done. The authorities sent mother and son to a temporary holding facility ahead of trial, but Louise's health began collapsing rapidly during her imprisonment. 2 weeks after her arrest, authorities announced that Louise Monnier had died in custody of heart failure before she could ever stand trial. Some accounts say that during those final 2 weeks, she finally came to fully grasp what she had done to her own daughter all those years. Her last words, it said, were ones of grief and anguish over Blanche. As for Marcel, his trial proceeded in open court amid widespread public demand that he be punished to the fullest extent. Marcel insisted he was innocent. He claimed that locking Blanche away and starving her had been entirely his mother's doing, that he had simply been present, uninvolved in the decision. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in prison. But Marcel was a lawyer, and it showed. He knew exactly how to work the system. He appealed his sentence, arguing that Blanche had been insane, that she could have walked out of that room any time she wanted, but had chosen of her own free will to remain there. His appeal succeeded. His sentence was overturned, and he walked free, to the shock and outrage of everyone watching. During the investigation, police also discovered something unsettling. Blanche's imprisonment had never really been a secret. Several neighbors and relatives had known about it all along, but to them, Blanche was simply insane, and in that era, it was considered normal for the mentally ill to be locked away at home to keep them from harming themselves or others. Even the household staff who worked in the Monnier home knew about Blanche, but they claimed that from the day they'd started working there, she had already been confined to that room.
so to them it was simply a private family matter that was none of their business.
As for the letter that alerted police to Blanche, its source remains unknown to this day. Some accounts suggest that Louise had hired 2 new servants and that one of them told her husband about Blanche's story. It's speculated that perhaps it was this servant's husband who wrote and sent that letter to the police, but this remains disputed, with no way to confirm it. As for the lawyer Blanche had loved so deeply, reports say he died in 1885, 9 years into her imprisonment. Of course, there was no way for Blanche, locked in that room, to have ever known. At the hospital, Blanche's physical health slowly began to improve under continuous care. Over time, she gained back some weight and regained a measure of her physical strength. But the psychological damage inflicted by 25 years of darkness and isolation, they say, was permanent. She never fully recovered her mental faculties. Later, Blanche was transferred to a care facility in Paris, where she lived out the rest of her life quietly, until she passed away of natural causes in 1913, 12 years after her rescue. The Monnier family home no longer stands today. It was demolished and rebuilt sometime in the first half of the last century. But those who entered Blanche's room after her rescue said the walls were covered floor to ceiling in writings and markings she had etched during her years of captivity. Religious phrases, prayers pleading with God to let her leave that room and reclaim her freedom, drawings of religious symbols, hearts, and certain words repeated again and again across the walls. Most of all, 2 words, freedom and love. Thank you for watching. This is one of those stories that stayed with me for a long time, one I couldn't shake until I finally made this video about it. I hope I did it justice. To this day, people still debate what really happened to Blanche. Was she truly mad? Did love simply blind her? Was her mother's cruelty the real injustice here? What do you think actually happened? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.